store in
Right,
Main Street.
right.
And I actually
Right, it's
have
the music store now.
Sure,
Yeah.
okay. What I thought was really bizarre, they said there was actually a bra and corset shop.
Oh yes, oh yeah, that's
I couldn't find my size, but from what I mean,
oh no,
but is that true?
oh yeah, and I really get into the Wizard of Bras porch a lot in Progress City because it's, to me, it's the definition of great Disney design. But if you go on Main Street, next to the Silhouette shop, on the east side of Main Street,
They mentioned so, yeah.
is a little porch. And if you were to look at it from an urban planner or an historian point of view, the way that towns develop, that would have probably been the last residential residence on the Main Street that wasn't converted into a retail store. And instead it was a house that was converted into a retail store. So for the first 6 months of the park, it was Hollywood Maxwell's Intimate Apparel, better known as the Wizard of Bras store. And it had a corset a corset in display, and you pushed a button, and a little recording went 4 minutes or so and told you about the history of ladies' lingerie. And the stories that I've heard is that the reason they put that store there is every other storefront on Main Street has very low windows so the children can look up into the windows. Yeah. But because of the porch, you can't look directly into the window in the store. So kids couldn't see the lingerie. Plus at the time, men were really embarrassed about walking in lingerie stores, so they could sit out on the porch while they waited for their wives to do shopping. It lasted for approximately 6 months. And doing some research, but this came unfortunately right after the book was published, that was another Lillian thing. Lillian used to buy her underwear from Maxwell's, and that was another Walt went, if that's where she's buying her lingerie, then maybe I should get them there too. And that's what Walt did a lot, is he's trying to find ways of getting his wife to buy stuff in his park so that she would come down to the park. But yes, the Wizard of Bras porch, I say strongly, the next time you're at Disneyland, grab a soda, grab a popcorn, or candy apple or something, just sit there. It is the most zen view of Disneyland because you get to see this wonderful parade of people passing you by. You feel safe, you're protected, you're slightly elevated. It's a very luxurious little place. It's a great place to sit. It's one of my favorite places. It is the only equivalent that I've seen at Walt Disney World to that are the 2 rocking chairs on the side of the Hall of Presidents, where you sit there, where you can feel free to sit there and watch the parade of people. The Wizard of Bras porch is even better than that, and it's the same thing. So, hope that answered your question.
Really?
Yeah, that's right. All right, there was another hand too. Mr. Corcus, the world's famous Mr. Corcus. How many have bought the Walt of Vault 3 already?
They know that Vault of Wall 3 is out.
Yeah.
I didn't mention it
Oh, you
in your
didn't?
introduction.
Jim, do you have a new book out?
Yes, I do. I have a book that came out 2 weeks ago, Vault of Walt 3, and also another book, Animation Anecdotes, which is based on that. And next week, a 3rd book out called Walt's Garage of Dreams, which I co-wrote with Arthur Adler, who saved Walt's Garage at an auction out there in California. Now I have a question for you. I know that you know a lot. If you don't know this, I won't be disappointed.
Okay.
Is it true that at break you will be selling copies of your book and they have some of the same stories you shared here tonight?
They have many of the same stories, but in much greater detail because that's the charm of a book that's 176,000 words long.
And you'll be taking cash or check?
Cash or check, or if I get my internet thing working, I'll even be able to take credit cards, and I'm only going to be charging $19, and I'll even happily include a signature and shake everybody's hand who buys one because it's every book that I sell is one less book I have to carry back to California with me tomorrow, and I really would like to go back empty-handed if I could do it, and they make great Christmas gifts as well.
Thank you for answering that question.
Thank you, Jim.
I didn't know whether you would have an answer.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I appreciate that one. And back to our regular programming. Are there any other questions or comments? We'll come to you and then you. And thank you for giving me the Jack Skeleton for the president talk. Yes?
What are you working on next?
What am I working on next? The next, it's almost like another opening line, isn't it? Well, the next book is Universal versus Disney. This is coming out November the 18th. It's the 2nd book I've done for the unofficial guide. It is the first time that I'm aware of that anybody's written a history of the Universal Studios tour and the Universal theme parks. I talked to most of the principals who designed all those parks because unlike Disney, most of them are still alive. And so I got firsthand accounting about how and why. And it's a very different story than Disneyland. I mean, I love this is a very romantic story about Disneyland. Universal is really a very Hollywood story. And it's basically a bunch of movie moguls sort of, to each other, and that's why the process, I mean, Disney never wanted to compete against Universal. They were quite happy with a very, very profitable tour. They're very, very happy with a very profitable tour. They didn't want to get in the theme park business. I have all sorts of studies for that that show they try to avoid it. But when they were push come to shove, when Eisner decided to move forward, basically stealing the idea when he was from a Paramount, then they became a blood feud. And now today, as it turns out, the guy who runs Comcast and the Disney and the Universal parks used to work for Disney, got passed over, running the Disney parks, and now he's basically going to Disney and trying to show up Disney and said, you should have hired me instead of Paul Pressler instead. So that's why the battle. So that's the next book that comes out. Beyond that, I'm not sure if I'm doing another book in the immediate future about because I'm an urban planner, right? What I call a closed narrative environment. Because that's what the theme parks are. I work with communities in Southern California doing visioning and creating spaces and places and leading community workshops. And the next book will probably be something written about the community collaborative planning process that I use in California so successfully. I've done like 1,000 community workshops in design cities and stuff like that, and general plans. And then I also worked on another project that was related to Disney, but I can't talk about it at all. That was a lot of fun. And then you had a question?
How much research did you do on Bill Evans? Very much?
Quite a bit, actually, because Bill Evans was one of the real critical players that made Disney different than every place else. The use of plant material, and you'll read it a lot in the book, you'll read a lot of Ray Bradbury quotes about the trees, the planting, because Bill Evans helped create the primary concept of the needed but not necessary, which is what Disney's all about. You put things in the parks that are not necessary, but they're needed.
I can't prove this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. He had a nursery out behind Stony Brook.
Yes, that's right, he did.
He,
Yeah,
that's true.
Almost the moment that they bought property in Florida, he was already starting to do planting because he wanted to understand what the Florida weather was going to do on certain types of plants.
Well, my wife and I stumbled in there one day, and we were talking to people, and they said that the original owner was the guy that did all the plant work out at Disney.
Yeah.
And this was his personal nursery.
Yeah.
And then he raised stuff there to sell to Disney.
Yeah, what he did when he was his own landscape architect, and he worked with Walt, actually he was a landscaper, he wasn't a landscape architect, and he worked with Walt on his Holmby Hills house, he and his brother. And then Walt invited he and his brother to work on Disneyland. His brother was very ill and ended up dying shortly thereafterwards. So he worked on it and then worked all the way up to Walt Disney World and did consulting and stuff afterwards. But he was this genius with plant material and how to utilize plant material in a way that no one else had ever done before. And I think he was really one of the secret weapons that Walt had, because no place else had this kind of a lush forest that they had, as I stated earlier. But yeah, he property. When we tried to convince Walt that the idea of Disneyland would be possible, Bill Evans and his brother used to have houses up in the Hollywood Hills area, and they had gardens. So they had like a cactus garden and a tropical garden, and they would walk Walt through, and they would show the different plants so he could understand what it is they wanted to plant and what it would look like when it was fully grown. So yeah, that's Mr. Evans. Yes, sir.
In 1990, I had access to the Disney video archives here in Florida to show you how competitive they were. On Christmas Day, they took a helicopter ride and flew over Universal Studios and videotaped with close-ups of the construction
Yes.
in different areas so that they could figure out when they would have it finished, because they actually zoomed in on the welders. You could actually see them welding certain attractions there.
Yeah.
So that's how nervous Disney was. And that's why they rushed the studios open as they did a year before Universal opened theirs.
Yeah, they had the advantage of having the entitlement process already put in place because of the Reedy Creek Improvement District.
Yeah.
So that didn't hurt any either. But yes, that's true. And there's a wonderful story, and I've seen photos of it, but I've never seen the video of it, of the day when the Universal characters decided they wanted to go visit the Magic Kingdom. So there was a confrontation between Woody Woodpecker and Mickey Mouse, and I have a lot of photos of that. And there was other things too, like it really was Hollywood moguls all just kind of going meh to each other, and that was part of the fun of the story. Is a lot of their competitiveness was just revenge. You know, good old-fashioned, bloodthirsty Hollywood revenge, and guys with egos. I have a picture of Barry Upson, who was the first general manager of Universal Studios Hollywood Tour, who was the guy in charge of building Universal Studios Florida. And so there's a picture of him pointing, and then there's a picture, and next to him is Lou Wasserman, the famous movie mogul who ran MCA and was the most powerful guy in Hollywood at the time. And then there was a guy named Jay Stein. And if you've ever gone to Universal Parks, the Universal Park area, and there's the Gramercy Park area. Now, a lot of you probably would recognize the Lou Wasserman statue because you're a pretty savvy group. But if you look at the Gramercy Park and you see the heart angel, and you see the angel on top of the pillar, if you were to look at his face really, really closely, it's the face of Jay Stein, who is the guy who is in charge and the person personally responsible for Universal getting into Florida and doing theme parks in Florida. And so that's how he's been honored. And the reason why Universal only started with 400 acres is Lou Wasserman told him, said, I have 400 acres in Los Angeles, I'm not using all of it. Why do you need more land than that? So that's why they only bought 400 acres here originally, because he figures it was just like Hollywood. And there's that picture of Barry Upson, who I think is explaining to Lou Wasserman what's going on. And then there's Jay Stein, who's really excited looking, and he's pointing, and he's hyping up Lou and saying, Lou, this is going to be great, this is going to be wonderful, this is going to be great. And then I see Lou Wasserman in the middle, and he's just sort of standing like this, and he's, in my head, I'm thinking, Lou Wasserman's thinking, I'm spending $600 million freaking dollars for this? Will you just get the thing open so I can start getting my money back? And I think that's pretty much how the management of MCA ran Universal when it first started. But I digress. And then they've gone through about, what, 18 owners now, something like that. Any other questions about Disney or any other sort of stuff? Mr. Corcus.
You're really selling the book? Okay. You talked about the trains. I think one story that is not in the book is about an incident with a train that got overheated and might have... I missed that one too. I got, one of the fun things about writing these books is that when they're done, people who have extra information start delivering information. You start learning things. And so the Retlaw, you're familiar with what Retlaw is? Retlaw was Walt's personal company that owned the trains, owned the monorail, owned the tiki room. It was the big reason why Walt and his brother Roy were estranged for a while, because Walt was basically renting his name to the Disney studios, so he was making more money than his brother with that. And so the two had real issues with that. But and that's why Walt was able to drive the train, because it was his train. He literally owned his train. And let's see. So the question is what? So afterwards, Retlaw, the unofficial. Well, I say the unofficial, but he really is the official historian of Retlaw, who was a longtime employee, gave me all of the Retlaw logs. He gave it to me, and I felt so honored, because he said, if I send this, everybody's looking for the dirt, and you're actually like a real historian, and you look for the right stuff. And so I was looking through it, and that's where I learned the story about Walt. But also I asked him, how closely did the train ever come to having a real problem of blowing up? And he said that through the research, we looked and we figured out twice. One time the water level was fairly low, and they were able to get some water into it just about the right time, but they evacuated the train anyways. And then the second time was the closest time. The second time the water level was so low, and the engineer was so afraid that he wasn't going to be able to get it filled, he parked the train and shut it down inside of one of the tunnels and stayed with it, expecting it to blow up. And if it blew up, at least it would blow up in the tunnel with him, and it would save people in the park. And that was the closest that they had to a really serious accident with the train. Now, of course, the ride that killed most of the people was the People Mover. Killed more people at Disneyland than any other single ride, because there were mostly high school students jumping from one car to another. And at Disneyland, it wasn't little electric magnets that were pushing you forward, they were little electric wheels that were pushing you forward, and the poor kids would get trapped underneath and then dragged a few hundred feet. Do we have some food? All right, any other questions or comments? With that, Thank you so much for sharing all of
thank you, Jim. And yes, I will be selling books in real life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. And just for you, we have our special. Greg.
Oh, look at this. Oh, fancy. This is gonna go on the shelf, but it's gonna go on backwards so I can have it.
There you go. Thank you so much. It's almost break time. I'm sorry?
Door prizes.
Oh, yeah, we're going to door prizes. And just remember at break, we have number one, we have his book, and he and Bob